Okay.
All right. That's good. All right. We'll wait for you. Yeah, you know. All right, I'll call the Winnebago County Human Services Board meeting to order. First order of business, public comment. Any public comment from any of the public? Nobody on Zoom or nothing? All right. Okay, then moving on to the program, elder abuse awareness. That's Roberts.
I know she needs a wheelchair wash.
It's a lone scooter. I hope they won't have to get it washed. A little bit contortionist here.
You're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
At least it's warm out for your toes, huh?
I know, luckily. So you guys all know who I am, and I'm here to introduce our adult protective services and the elder abuse aspect of it. Nicole Davis DeWald is the supervisor for that program. So she's going to talk about some of the statistics and details that you might be interested in. But for those of you who aren't aware, adult protective services, if you kind of think of the child protective services role, we protect vulnerable adults as opposed to vulnerable children. So it could be an adult who has maybe a cognitive delay or a physical disability. Anyone over 60 is considered an elderly person who could be at risk. Some of you might have read in the paper that there was the first elder abuse financial in the state, thanks to her team of people, because recognizing that there's some vulnerability of people in our community. And so whenever we get a call, we don't have the option of screening it out during the call. We have to respond to all of our calls and determine whether there is indeed a need for further investigation and or intervention to help protect the person. So we'll share a few anecdotal situations too to help you really grasp about what does that look like when we are investigating referral and then putting some things in place to help prevent further abuse or further problems with the person and who's not taking care of them. There's also several different kinds of elder abuse that you see in our annual report that talk about financial, sexual, physical, also self-neglect. So again, that's a person who might have a cognitive disability and their ability to take care of themselves is compromised. With self-neglect, it can get a lot trickier because people have the right to refuse insulin, to refuse medication, to live in a home that's in very, very, very poor condition that might be a lot of filth, practically condemnable. But until it becomes health and safety, self-neglect is a harder situation to require or mandate intervention. That's one where we try and convince the person that we can help them voluntarily. So I'm going to let Nicole talk a little bit more again about exactly what they do, some statistics and some stories.
Sure. So starting in February of this year, we changed the way that we handle adult protective services. So prior to February, whoever was on call would get the calls and they would make a decision how to react to the calls. And one of the concerns that I had heard since I started supervising them about a year and a half ago was, depending upon who you get as a worker, you're going to get a different response. And so in order to have more consistent responses and build a better reputation in the community with our partners and with just community members, now I screen all of the referrals. So every referral that comes in for adult protective services comes through me, and then I fill out a response metric as to how the staff are going to respond. This way that it doesn't matter who gets the referral, everybody will have the same type of response, and so that we can build a better relationship in the community with our partners. And so I believe that since we started doing that, it's been going really well. It's a change since of how things have been done in a long time, but I think it's been going really well. So the really awesome thing about that is that I then can keep data on really what kind of referrals we're getting in, how we're responding to them, and who we're getting those referrals from, which wasn't something that we were able to take in the past because it would depend if the person was putting it in as a referral or not. So I just wanted to give everybody data from last month, so April. In April, we got 80 referrals I took 80 referrals. And the most prevalent referral is for financial exploitation. We are getting a lot of calls from banks, specifically banks, but also from other community members who are concerned. So 13% of our 80 referrals were from for financial exploitation. Financial exploitation is pretty hard to prove right now, unfortunately, because a lot of the scammers are very smart and they're able to get people to buy gift cards to then utilize those gift cards to get their money taken. So in the last month, there was some people who lost $100,000, some people who lost $200. We've seen it all. And generally people aren't getting that money back because the scammers are very smart and having people do cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, or gift cards. So that is one of our areas of focus when we're going out into the community and providing outreach is on financial exploitation and scams, because it's something that we're seeing to be one of the most prevalent things that come through us. One of our biggest asks is to do welfare checks on people. So someone in the community has a concern, and 20% of the time of the calls that we get are specifically just to check on someone and provide them with education, outreach, resources. And so that's something that I think that we're learning to do very well, is by going out and checking on people. So prior to me being more directive regarding how we're going to do the referrals, staff were going out sometimes less than 5% of the time, and now minimally staff are going out 50% of the time. So even if it's not a welfare check, if it's for another reason, staff are going out more and engaging with people in the community. So hopefully that's building upon our relationships with people, because what we've learned, and the example that I'm going to show everyone, is that it's not always the first time that you meet with someone that someone's going to change or someone's going to accept help. Sometimes it's planting a seed and then you go out again and you talk to them again. But the more that they see you as a trustworthy person who has something valuable to give them, you can build relationships with people and make a difference. So one of the examples, my favorite example that I have, so we took on a dementia intern, and our concern was that we have a vast variety of programs in Winnebago County for dementia, but people aren't engaging in the program. So how do we get people to take the step from having a dementia diagnosis to engaging in the programs in order to be proactive? And one of the things that we saw is that people need someone to build a relationship with them for them to trust to go to the programs. So we had our dementia intern specifically engage in all of the programs in Winnebago County. So she had a vast knowledge of what those look like and who would be good fits for those. And then when there were people who needed assistance, either getting to the programs or learning about the program, she would go out and provide case management to them. And so one of the cases that came into Adult Protective Services was a case of someone who was pretty far gone with their dementia. They weren't able to drive anymore, but they continued to drive. They would go to the grocery store and not know where they were or how to get home. They would have spoiled food in the refrigerator and not know if they should eat it or what they were eating or if they were drinking. And they had someone in their life who was very concerned about them. And so our dementia intern went out and met with them and built a relationship with her, and built a very trusting relationship because she had refused to go to the doctor to get a competency evaluation. And over the course of her internship, so over the course of 3 months, she built such a strong relationship with her that customer was able to meet with one of our psychologists and do the full competency evaluation so that we could get her a guardian, so that we could have someone who could make those choices for her and ensure her safety. But prior to this, our we tried everything. We had other APS workers going out. She refused to go to the doctor. Her family members weren't able to get her to go. So with building that relationship, we were able to, we are thinking avoid a crisis, because eventually this would have came to a point where she would have been in more danger. So that's a very exciting to me and happy story of how getting out in the community and building relationships does make a difference. But yeah, questions?
Before you get to questions, I don't want to forget that there is an elder abuse awareness event this year on June 15th. It starts here at the county building at noon. And we're just going to walk on over to the sundial with some flowers to recognize the number of adult elder abuse cases that we had last year. There's going to be some speakers, some snacks, food, beverages, whatnot. So if you're interested, just mark, excuse me, June 15th, and then I'll have flyers at your next meeting to give you regarding specifics for that. So and you can go to questions.
Good. I find it kind of interesting there. Only in the past, only 5% of the agency or people went out to talk to people on this welfare or wellness check. Now 50%. I mean, that's huge difference. But why was there only 5% in the past?
I would say that it wasn't always just 5%. It was maybe in 1 month that I looked at, but a lot of times it was less than 10% that they would go out. One of the things that I think that the transition, a lot of the referrals that aren't emergent, I take them on myself. And so I'm, connecting them with resources, sometimes transitioning them to an INA, Christine Ann. So a lot of the legwork that the APS workers have had to do in the past, I'm able to do for them, so they have more time to be able to go out in the community.
And that would be important because they called you. So it's like someone reaching out instead of you're trying to find them, which is important. Usually that call is for a call of a reason. So you gotta check and find out what it is. So I commend you that you're doing that well. That's just great. You're doing that. And that example you gave was a good one too. And I know about the one I heard about there with the housing, I think, wasn't it? So they were taking advantage. They finally got it. I mean, that was really huge, a lot of money. So that was huge.
And part of historically, the reason why financial abuse was so hard to do anything about is the victim isn't considered a reliable witness because they're often have dementia or some memory loss, so they aren't sure exactly what they told someone they could or couldn't do. A large part of the time, the person who is the perpetrator is either a family member or caregiver. So people are like, well, they're going to get the money eventually anyway, that kind of an attitude. So the police department had a hard time charging people because they knew the DA's office wasn't going to be able to prosecute, so they weren't charging it. And the DA's office a number of years back really went gung-ho to say, wait a minute, these are felony charges. And one of the assistant district attorneys did this massive training to the rest of the DA department and to all of the law enforcement in the agency to say, we will prosecute these. These are the statutes. This is what you charge them with. We are going to start taking these seriously. And it was shortly after that case came to be. We've had some since then, but this was the first felony of that magnitude in the whole state that got prosecuted. So I think everyone is now on board to recognize financial abuse is financial abuse. It doesn't matter how old the person is, what their IQ is, anything like that. It's abuse.
Chris?
Beth sort of answered part of my question. I was assuming that you work a great deal with the police department, sheriff's department, courts. When there's a welfare check, are there pairs of people going out, or it seems like it could be a really dangerous situation? Could be potentially dangerous or unusual situation for a welfare check.
Sometimes, so 3 of the referrals last month were directly from law enforcement. One of the things that we did was we went to all of the roll calls for the Oshkosh Police Department. They do a roll call before every shift. And we went out and talked to the police about making a referral before it becomes a crisis. So if you see a minor issue with someone, call the ADRC. And their concern was, when we call, nobody does anything. And so we have guaranteed that if the police call, we will screen that referral in and make sure that we engage with that person. And so one of our efforts to be more proactive has been to try to engage with community partners to make sure that we are working with people when there's a minor concern. So before it becomes someone's wandering in the middle of the road with no shoes on, but you've taken them home one time. Usually when the police were making a referral to us, it was because this is the 5th time they've seen that person. And so when I went to the roll calls and talked to all the police officers, I said, the first time that you see someone, call us and we can try to help them before it becomes a crisis. So I think that has really helped too.
Yeah, I think also with law enforcement, you know, having that relationship and that training has been really helpful. We have an ability to get financial information from any type of financial institute. So they might get a report from someone and be like, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't prove one way or another what's happening. Our APS workers have the ability to call the financial institution and get the records. So we have a little bit, so we can do the legwork for them. In that particular case, the APS worker had a stack this big of paperwork that she was able to hand over to law enforcement. They couldn't have done that. So that partnership is really, really important. There's also an elder abuse interdisciplinary team, which is people from the community, law enforcement agencies, animal shelter, financial institutions, a lot of people who somehow touch the APS world that meet quarterly to talk about how do we partner.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, very good.
All right, we'll move on to approve the minutes of the April 3rd, 2023 Human Services Board meeting.
Move for approval.
Motion was made to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passed. Number 4, inpatient and institutional placement stats. Bill.
All right, our typical sheets. Actually, I was looking it over real quick before the meeting and not a whole lot has changed between last month and this month. Of course, you know, we're always a month behind on our statistics, but everything seems to be going pretty much the same with juvenile corrections, top of page 1. Don't need to say anything different there. Bottom of page 1, RCCs. There again, from February to March, same number there. So things are the same, although RCCs, I told you last month that residential care centers are kind of like facilities. Most people identify Rawhide as like a typical residential care facility. We have about 10 or so in the state of Wisconsin. And then when those 10 or so don't want to accept one of our kids, then we have to look outside the state. And we are in the process of potentially having up to 6 kids in RCCs this year. And I mentioned that last month, and 2 of which we have had to try to find placements outside the state of Wisconsin, 1 in Minnesota and 1 in Texas, I believe. So Annette and her staff are working diligently to try to prevent all 6 from having to go to RCCs, but they may go and we may have to deal with 6 at one time, but hopefully not.
Any of them related to each other?
They're not related, are they? No.
And we actually just got one into a foster home in Green Bay this morning.
Oh, so now we're down to 5. Okay, so as I said, Annette and her staff are trying to find alternatives to that as we speak. So that number is likely to go up and we will deal with it as it goes up. And the good news is we will also try to get these kids back as soon as we can too. And the typical stay in RCCs, 10, 20 years ago was probably 2-3 years. Now it's more like a year. Hopefully we can get kids back within a year. Sometimes it's a little longer than that. Sometimes it can be shorter depending on what the needs are of the kids. So
Thank you. Got a question?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. How do you evaluate those out-of-state RCCs to make sure that they are
adequately licensed and supervised and meet the standards that we have here in Wisconsin.
So we will talk to other agencies that refer kiddos to them. So do a lot of stuff online, but then also talk to other agencies in the state that go there. And then when we do, we send a supervisor and a social worker down there to check it out and to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. And then we stay in touch the best that we can. It is tough because it's different licensing. You know, we have to get all of the same information that we do from our folks. You know, we're getting a copy of their license. We know whether or not they've had any issues. We have their insurance. We get all of those kinds of things to establish a contract with them and then just continue to talk to them. So our resource team talks to them and does a lot of vetting. And then the social worker and supervisor of the kiddo that's going to go out of state will also talk with the facilities and other people in the state that have referred to them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if we turn to page 2, these are our adults in the hospital up on the upper graph and our kids in the hospital on the lower graph. Adults in the hospital went down a little bit from February to March, although that number is on the rise, and we will keep you posted on that in months to come. And the kids going up from 0.4 of one person to 1.2 of one person on average per day is not alarming. It's just the nature of, you know, kids in hospitals. So I don't see that that's a big trend change at all. It's just the nature of how things move from month to month. Okay, and then if we turn to page 3, Child Welfare Division Secure Detention. Last February, we were up to 3.3, March down to 2.6, and this number is going to vary up and down throughout the year as well. And we still do the most of our placements at Fond du Lac, which we have a contract for 3 beds, I believe. And then when they can't accept our kids, then we have to look at other counties that still have secure detentions, and they have to be placed there. So there's a few counties not as close as Fond du Lac that we can refer to. I think one of them is over in the center part of the state. But we reflect this in terms of how many kids do we have, you know, per day throughout the month. All right, and then Child Welfare Division Foster Care is down to 36. I think our lowest ever was March.
Wow.
Do you see any trends? Are they going back up, or are they staying about there? What do you think?
I think they're staying about there. I mean, you know, 1 or 2 here and there, but we're going to get them with relatives. That's what we're doing.
Yep, good. Yeah, if we can find relatives, and if you look at the back page, which is our relatively new 4th page, is kinship care placements. And you see our number there from January, February, and then March. And there was an increase of 7 in kinship care, which again, if we want to see any number going up,
Yeah,
this is the number we want to see going up, because it means that kids are being placed with like kin. And that's where we prefer them to be if we can find a place for them.
Question for them. I know that when Missy was in Massachusetts, you all regularly, I don't know how often, but you sent people out, check on her, check on the facility, you did some Zoom things with her. When people are as far away, like even as close or far away as Green Bay, how often do you check those places? Or do you expect Brown County to do those checks?
No, we have to do all the checks no matter where they are. So like the out of states, we'll do a monthly virtual, and then once a quarter, I think it's every 3 months, sometimes every 2 months, we'll fly the workers out there to be there and see that. Same things here, you know, they're not flying, but they will get over to those facilities to see them at least once a month.
So you're going to Green Bay once a month? Okay,
At a minimum. I mean, they could be going there every week
okay,
to check on them.
okay, thank you.
That's it for my.
Any other questions on that?
I don't have a question, I
Go
just
ahead.
have a comment. I mean, just for, as a layman looking at this, from 2015 to now, it's been unbelievable on every category. You guys have done better. Who takes credit for that?
Staff.
Staff,
Staff,
that
yeah.
staff should, we didn't have a staff before we do now. Because
The staff and the supervisors who understand and share the philosophy that we all do of trying to find and keep kids in their own home if at all possible. And I think over the years, we've gotten better and better at it. If you would go back to 2007, when I first got here in 2008, the actual numbers over here would be twice as high as 2015. So they have literally come down that much. And I think the reason they've come down that much is because everybody has embraced this philosophy of local service, staying with family, wrapping services around kids and families have made the biggest difference. Is like, let's get the service out there to where people are, where they're struggling. Let's do it early. Let's put intensity around it. And that we can stop all of the deep end placements, because you guys get the report of the most expensive placements that we have in human services. And that's why we started doing this, was to say, if what we're doing works, then one of the places that's going to show up is in our statistics. And that's what we do.
Unbelievable, commendable that you guys are doing that. And that's just from 15. You didn't show us the other one, but
Yeah.
that's a huge difference. Some of these are almost right in half. I mean, it's a credit to what you guys are doing, the belief and the leadership, and also, I gotta say something.
A little plug, Ralph, just because our divisions that have these charts, not that all of our managers aren't wonderful, because they are. But Heather, Tammy in behavioral health, and Annette in child welfare, because they're the ones that have to answer to this guy every month about these. Work incredibly hard to run those divisions in the way that we need them to be run.
What's good, people need to know that, that's important. You know, you just look at every day, you just take it for granted. This is unbelievable work.
And if we did the other division, if we did the other divisions, they're not so much placement heavy, but what they are is participant heavy. So the other divisions, economic support and long-term support and admin, the more people we could continue to take on to serve, the more they have to do with this, with the same or just a little bit of an increase in staff over those same years. So if I would show you those things, it would be like, we haven't added twice as many staff, but we've taken on literally twice as many participants in all of our programs, and we're still able to make that work. So that's another way that we could say, you know, it's, I mean, we can't, the other thing we need to do as well is to survey our participants to say, are we meeting your needs? Are we really getting at what you needed us to do? And in some cases, we do that. In other cases, we don't have a protocol. But we do also have a complaint process, a very robust complaint process. And Renee and I get to hear everybody who's unhappy with our service. And we do get a few, but it's literally a couple handfuls a year. I mean, literally, it's not like hundreds and hundreds of people going, we don't like what you're doing. It's literally a couple of handfuls of people that said, you know, I didn't get what I needed. And Renee and I basically start out with the position, let's go with the belief that they're right, that they actually got a bad service. Then what can we do, working from, not try to justify why we did our stuff right, but basically like, okay, we dropped the ball here. Okay, they believe that we dropped the ball. Okay, so let's figure out why the ball got dropped, and then what do we need to do to improve the service. And that's how we approach each and every one of the complaints, is not trying to tell them why the client is wrong and that they don't understand what we're doing, but it's to basically say, okay, you experienced a bad interaction. Let's try to get to the bottom of why that happened. Or you got an outcome that you didn't expect, or you didn't get the outcome that you wanted. So let's figure that out, why that happened, and then try to build a better service array. So that's the feedback. You know, we always take feedback because we want to know what we're dropping the ball on, because every once in a while we drop the ball, and we gotta admit to it and make it right. And let's err on the side of what, you know, people feel they need, because that's where the business. So anyway, so those are, but thank you on behalf of the staff for acknowledging that, Ralph, because, you know, that's what happens when everybody is on the same team going in the same direction, you know. And that's what you try to build as leadership, try to build all of us understanding what the mission is and going in that direction.
Appreciate that 8 years of success as it looks like right here. Looks like real good success.
Any other questions on stats?
Ralph's observation and comments are just lead to part of why I am so proud to sit on this board. This is a great department. And you all, it's not just because of Bill. He's a good leader. You all do the work. You do the heavy lifting and you are appreciated, believe me.
Any other question?
Can I just make one more point for you guys on the foster care numbers? One of the other things, you're like, it takes a village with these kids and with this work for everybody. But like something also that's happened in the last year is that our corporation council contracts with attorneys to file our termination of parental rights. That's those kiddos that we can't go back home because of the safety. We aren't able to make that happen. They potentially may not have a relative, but they're gonna find permanence with whomever they're with. So it could be that they're with their foster parent. And we've been able to move a lot of kids out of foster care in the last, for sure the last 6 months, probably the last year, quite a few that have been on that in foster care, unable to get through the court process to have their rights terminated. So then they fall off of this list of foster care kiddos because they have a family.
Good.
And that's legally changed. So that's a big thing. The other part is just even today, when I just said about this one kiddo that we found a foster home, that's a partnership with CLTS, that's Beth's people, the Children's Long-Term Support, because they're going to help us fund everything that this child needs within this home through their program. So it really is everybody kind of working together with some of these really tough kids that we're able to make some of this happen. So just wanted to make sure to point that out.
All right. Financials, Janet.
Okay, so you have financials based on March information. And you'll see that we're looking at 4.4 million projected at year end. However, I do think that number will come down. If you look at labor right now, we're favorable, and that's because of some of the vacancies. However, we haven't had any of the differential pay that was approved yet. So that's going to make quite a difference there. As well as, I'm not exactly sure how all of this is going to pan out with the wage increases. They haven't done any adjustments through the finance department yet. So that number is definitely going to be changing, but I don't have that information yet through March. If you look at capital, you'll see that we have $1 million. That was an amount transferred in, and it was for the purchase of the shelter care facility. 700,000 of that was for the actual purchase of the building, and then they gave us another 300,000 for maintenance and some improvements to the physical property. So that was an adjustment that was made through the finance department into our budget this year. Our operating expenses, we're showing quite a savings right now. I anticipate that number is going to be going down as we progress through the year. It's early in the year, and one of the things that happens is we don't pay our contracted vendors until contracts are fully executed. And sometimes that doesn't happen until March or April. So we'll be seeing some of those expenditures going up, but I don't have that information reflected here yet. Revenues, we're projecting out a little bit higher than what we had budgeted for the department. And as you recall from last year and the year before, we do see those spikes in certain months throughout the year. So you'll see that happen again this year. If you look at the bar charts on page 2, you'll see that our revenues are our expenses are kind of close to where we're budgeted. Revenue is not quite where we want it to be. So again, we'll see those spikes and things will definitely fluctuate throughout the year. Final thing, we did have one unbudgeted revenue hit, and that was prior year revenue in the amount of 123,000, and that was related to 2021 income maintenance true-ups. So again, that's something we can't predict. The auditors don't want us to budget, so we always have that extra revenue coming in that we don't budget for, and this was related to 2021, so a year and a half ago. So, happy to answer any questions.
So could I just add 2 before you ask questions? The federal emergency for the pandemic is over on May 11th. I believe May 11th is the right date, I think. And with that is going to come something else. And there were a lot of exceptions made in a lot of federal rules during the pandemic that allowed for more and easier access for people to get mental health services, to get food supplementation, to get and stay on Medicaid, and the list goes on, right? Of all the things that were kind of relaxed in order for people to stay on benefits. With the end of the federal emergency, everything will be changed back to the way it was in 2019. And so we already are seeing the first part of that hit, the supplemental nutrition SNAP, which is under basically food share has been cut back to 2019 levels. And so some people have experienced quite a drop in how much they were getting for food share to what they're going back to what they were theoretically getting back. I'm using 2019 as the example because that's prior to the pandemic. So they're going to be getting a lot less in food share. There's a lot of people who were allowed to stay on Medicaid or Badger Care during the epidemic, even if their income status changed, even if their jobs changed. And now they're going to be reviewing those cases every month for the next year. And when their month comes up to review it, if their status has changed and they now have more money than what they would be allowed to have Badger Care, they're going to lose it. So there's going to be a lot of people losing some health care, be a lot of people cutting back on food share. Maybe that will affect some childcare too. Would it affect some childcare?
Childcare is
Not as
pretty
much.
has been back to
Not as
normal.
much. Okay. So just with that, and then in the mental health area, there were some special rules for seeing people or talking to people over the phone or doing some telehealth. And now some of those rules are going to be, kind of brought back in. You can still, I think, write a waiver for some of that to continue to occur, but some of that may prevent as easy an access as there was before. Some Medicaid funding, Medicaid was supplemented during the pandemic in some ways, so we got an enhanced rate. So we got an extra amount of money for every Medicaid service that we did. Where we were getting an extra amount of money, that's going to be cut back to what it was in 2019. So with all of these numbers, and why I'm bringing this up in the financial report, is that with those things changing, that means that maybe there'll be less money coming in the windfall in the fall. Also, the other thing I was thinking about is under some of these were operating expenses where we've had some extra placements that I just kind of talked to you about a few minutes ago. If we continue to have 5 or 6 placements in child welfare throughout the year, that could, cut into our operating budget by $1 million, $1.5 million. So what I'm trying to communicate to you is, even though when we say right now we're estimating 4.4 by the end of the year, that's if everything stayed the same as it was last year. Because that's the only way, other than the first 3 months, right? Other than the first 3 months of the actuals. So we have 9 months where we're just building into our projection what we were getting last year. So when you hear people going, well, gee, I thought human services was like going to go down with their surplus. It's like, well, I mean, theoretically, if all of these things that I just got done telling you are going to happen, we will have less surplus than 4.4 million at the end of the year. So I just wanted to let you know so when I see it, I'm thinking, how would I explain this to the average board member? Like, why does it look like we're still having this tremendously large surplus? It's like, it's just a projection, with all 3/4 of the year to go yet. So please, if anybody asks you to try to help them understand that it's not that we're trying to continue our budget at large surpluses. We're not. And as I said, many years, one of these years it's going to go down and it'll be like at 1.1 at the end of the year. And they'll go like, what happened to all that surplus? We liked all that surplus and now it's not there. So we are doing our best and we will do our best. And Janet will do her best to give you the most accurate readout every month, but it's still really a wild projection at this point, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of moving parts with the state right now too, as far as how we have to do some of our billing and things like that. So there's definitely more to come. This is going to be an interesting year, I think, of ups and downs.
Yeah.
Has the county board approved the purchase of the shelter care?
Yes, they did.
When do we start staffing?
It's already staffed. It's already going. It's been going.
I mean, we're hiring a firm to do it, or are we gonna have our own?
No, we have our own employees running it right now. Yeah. So they approved it in November.
You moved fast on that.
Well, what we did was we got our employees in place while we were still renting from LSS. So we had the staff already moving toward that in the middle of last year.
Harold, are you thinking about Silvercrest maybe, the group home and not shelter care?
You're thinking about
Because they're
shelter.
similar. So, because we've been doing shelter care since January and I know you're usually very with it. I know you're with it when we're spending
Yeah, that's
money.
right. I wasn't
So-
the one we talked about last time.
Yeah.
We were,
He's asking about
that was
Silvercrest.
shelter care.
Oh, you're asking about Silvercrest.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
mistake.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm gonna give a report on Silvercrest in a minute.
My mistake.
Okay.
that's okay.
Yep.
Couple questions. You said, the unemployment or spots are open. How many do we have that are vacancy right now? You know? There's a lot.
No, it's been a while since I looked. I was tracking it for a while.
Usually it's in the team.
Usually our two largest divisions have them. What do you got?
Seven?
We had like six.
Six or seven, so
About
13.
I would say usually it averages around 15.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
Well, there we have it, about 13.
It averages around 15.
For a while, we were averaging 20. That's actually pretty good for us.
Do you have, I mean, just asking about plan, I mean, is there people that are working here that want to move up to a spot that might be available? Or are you pretty much looking outside for everybody?
We look internal. I mean, I'll take an internal any minute. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we advertise to internals first and
Okay. Well, I know when I first took this job in the hallway down there, there was the whole board was full of different jobs that they had, but I haven't seen anything on it more, so that's why I'm asking that. No. The second word in this would, the day by day money we spent for that, where would that show up in here?
Oh, that's under admin.
Admin?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that'll come up when you ask those questions.
Well, so you know, that board got so cluttered.
It was a lot.
Yeah, that we have an online, all the postings are online, so there's like an internal.
There's not so much
that
paper
you go to
anymore.
To see it all online, because there were just so many up there.
That's online again, because I know I took a bunch of pictures, put it out there, and everybody said, holy cow, where do I find that?
We don't
That's right
even,
there.
we couldn't even we couldn't keep up with them. We
I
don't
know
even
there's
post
so
them there
many,
anymore.
yeah. Terrible. And you said admin is where that would be for that.
Yep.
And then the last question I would have is that on, now you're talking about with the pandemic over with. So you're kind of aware that where we might be short, because we got a budget coming up, we're gonna be talking about right pretty soon. And then, I know you're talking, some things might not be here. Are we preparing for that or kind of get an idea that what we might have to do or what we're gonna
yeah,
have to
we're
make up
working
some
on, we're
stuff
working on
or
budget.
where it's coming? I mean, I know it's going like it's okay, but then all of a sudden it's gonna drop somewhere, right?
Yeah, we have a pretty good idea of where we had received COVID funding.
Okay, you did. so
In
you-
fact, the auditors asked that question.
Yeah, they- okay,
So we had to put together a chart of what COVID funding we had received, so we know to back that out.
okay. But there might be some money from this overload that we have in the state, right? They might be. I know they got all this surplus now. They're talking about trying to find a way to go. I know we went there and talked about the health department, right? Or the
Well,
health.
we're still, I mean,
To get some
there are,
funds.
I hate to use the word grant because grant is like it's not a very specific word. It's, sometimes people think of grants as you get one-time money, very short-ended, like a couple of years, and then it's over. And it's to try to start something new. And I'm not talking about those kind of grants, but there are grants that in human services where the state will say, if you need more money to do medically assisted treatment for opioid dependent individuals, you can apply for more money. And you can apply for paying for social work support for that. And so when those things come out, Heather and her crew apply for those because they're not like trying to start something new with one-time money and then we're out of luck a year or two down the road. So we will try to find the other monies. And right now they're coming from the state instead of just giving us the extra money. They're throwing everything into kind of a grant formula. And what's difficult about that is that then you have to conform for that money, you have to conform to a bunch of new things, as opposed to if they just would have given us a supplement and say, hey, here's another $100,000 to continue to do work in this area. That's the way we would have preferred it. But they say, no, if you want another 100,000 in this grant, you can use it for that, but you got to do these three other things. And so then it's like, do we want to apply for it? Is it worth applying for it? What are the strings that are attached to it? And so that's what gets a little bit, it's not as easy as oh, we just have an extra 200,000. We'll just funnel it to you because you can use it. And that's how typically the last couple of years, things have gotten to us. It's like, we didn't have to really do that much application for it. We just basically were like, oh yeah, we could use another couple $100,000 for that. Sure, give it to us. So now it's gonna be, again, if we wanna do it, we have to think about it first and then think, are we adding expectations for that money? And that's the thing that we wanna be careful of. Just not adding too many more expectations.
Interesting.
Any other question on finance? Renee?
All right. So just a couple of things this last month or last couple of weeks, I should say. So, new to us this year and, as in like last couple of weeks. So we're in budget, we're in budget season. We just met with all the division managers, went through their preliminary budget. So what that means is, we sit down, Janet, Bill and I with the division manager. We go through just preliminarily, like, what do you think? Put in the numbers that you think you need. And then we talk about yes, no. Janet says maybe a little high, maybe a little low. Bill throws in his advice. We talk about grants that are under each division, basically money we give to other people. Take Day by Day, for example, or Reach or Advocate. There's lots of agencies that we give money to. As budgets get tighter and tighter, every year we have the conversation about, are we going to be able to do that again this year? So just have those conversations again. No firm decisions just yet. So we just finished those meetings last week, but what is very new to us is we have a new process. The county has a new process. You all heard it. Those of you on the full board heard some of this already about this process, about the consultant, about the new software we have coming in. Rachel and Karen heard me talk about it a little bit on our drive down to Madison. We're like, so new process as we're in the throes of budget. So we all, meaning the managers, Bill and I, we're going to be going through the phases of learning how this new process is, but the expectation is that we do it with our current budget, meaning what's happening right now. If I explain that in a nutshell. Okay, so we're a little like, oh my goodness, this is new and we're already in the throes of it, but the whole county is doing it, so we're all learning it together. Speaking of budget, because of this, and this was probably on your report, but the county exec has asked us to hold off on presenting to you. We landed on July 18th. I think most of you put that in your books, and it is not going to be July 18th because we need a little more time because now we have a new process. We looked at July 31st. Is that a go? Are we asking you July? Yep. So we're asking you to look at July 31st instead of July 18th.
So that's the meeting we had at the airport last year?
Yeah, so this is like the 9 to 2. We usually aren't here till 2 o'clock, but that's what we usually have you pencil out. Yeah.
I'm available that day.
Becky's saying no.
What time?
Starting at 9.
Okay.
So is that this Monday?
Monday.
So if it's not good for Becky, I mean, we could make it another day. We have to try to get it in before the end of July, because August, what John and Ethan would like to do is they would like to present to you at our first Monday in August meeting, the priority-based budgeting around human services. And so we needed time to basically get from you, what are your thoughts about, what to change in the budget, so that they had some time to consider that before they turn around and basically, give you some feedback on what they're thinking. So it's a little bit different this year because they want to try to do this priority-based budgeting and they want to give you feedback on it. But we had to have time to basically put this thing together so that we can give it to him, so that he has time to look at any changes that you might want to make, so that he can incorporate that into the priority-based budgeting. So, but it has to be as late as possible because of everything that's going on in our systems. They can't put it in earlier than like the very tail end of July. So,
So the 31st doesn't work for Beck, doesn't have to be Monday,
it doesn't have to be.
but we needed some time this week because Janet's still here that week. She's on vacation the following week and we can't do. We've already learned what happens when we talk about budget with Janet's not here.
Yeah, our meeting is. Our meeting is, no,
This is tomorrow.
no, that's second. Okay, so our meeting in August would be the seventh.
Yeah, that's the board meeting.
That's the
Janet's
board.
not here that day. Janet's not
Yeah,
here.
but that's, so.
But if John's coming
John
here,
and Ethan want to present
their thing, okay.
on their thing.
Mhm.
So we could either attempt for Tuesday. Does Tuesday work better?
August 1st.
August 1st?
I'm.
Are you off that whole
I'm
week?
out of town I leave on July 28th and I come back on August 11th.
Okay, so.
Becky's out, I think.
I mean, if John and Ethan were presenting on the 7th, I would attempt to attend that virtually. But that could be tricky based on where I am too.
So I think in a nutshell, if you think about how we've done our budgets in the past, we're gonna put together, we have a zero-based tax levy request. Okay, so that basically means whatever our increases are for our labor, our expenses, have to kind of net out to no more tax levy than the current year's tax levy. That's our target. That's not new. That's something we've done pretty much every year, right, Larry? Since we've been around here. So that's not new. And then we'll put together the budget that we think that we can make it work the best for a zero tax levy increase budget. So that's what we would bring to this group on the 31st. The only thing that you all might want to do is after you listen to how we did it, maybe you'd say, because we are going to be reducing some amounts to community partners, like we have done in the past. Last year we reduced some monies for transportation with the city, and we reduced some monies elsewhere. And we are going to probably be recommending some of those changes as well. That may be something you want to weigh in on and say you like it, you don't like it, you'd like to see something different. That's probably the one thing that I think you will probably have a reaction to. Other than that, it's probably going to be the budget's what it is. So it's a rule in the statute that you all create a budget to give to the county executive. As soon as you do that, it becomes his budget. And then he changes it up the way he wants to, and then presents it to the county board. You know, everybody says, why does that have to be done? I don't know. I don't know who put it in there. I don't know who put that requirement in there, but it's in there in the law. So that's why we do what we do. And it's so tight this year, that it's almost like simultaneous with, you know, what the county exec is going to be doing himself. So I think the most that you're going to be having some discussion around is likely going to be, what are we doing with the community partner allocations?
Yeah.
So if that helps to tell you what we're probably going to be focusing on that day, is probably going to be focusing on that.
So it's still gonna be the 31st.
Well, how about the 31st for the rest of you?
So we're
Because
gonna-
we need at least 5 of you.
July, right, 31st.
July 31st.
Yep, I'm okay. That's the day after EA is over. EA was over.
Yes, hopefully hopefully it doesn't conflict with that. Yeah, and it's,
You know,
Well, Bill, if I understood what you just said, I'd like to make a suggestion.
okay,
When you're working on the budget. Let's not keep nickel and diming some of these providers. Because we're slowly getting in a situation where they say you're running out of money and then you walk away and then we're gonna pick up the pieces. So let's not cut there too much.
well, we're going to be looking at allocations and exactly that. Like there are allocations where it might come back to haunt us. Other allocations, maybe it was something that was great for the community, but we don't have a direct connection to. So yes, we are looking at that. I mean, when we're looking at are we gonna limit everybody's situation? Probably not. I mean, we're gonna try to preserve some of our external partner relationships as much as we can. Anyway, we're just trying to figure out like, what's the date? And apparently, I've been told it needs to be as close to the end of July as possible because we're coming the next week to this meeting and they want to present their.
So you can remove the 18th
their
for
budget.
sure from your calendar. We're not meeting on the 18th.
Yeah, they said the 18th was too far back, so they need it to be as late in July as possible because the system that they put the budget together on is being upgraded and they want to make sure that it's set in order to input all of that data. So they want it to be as late in July as possible. So that's why it's happening.
Well, I don't understand. Let's back up a second here.
Sure.
I don't understand why. I mean, if that's the case, to me, it makes sense to have it on the 18th, so they have all the time they need to enter their information and do all that. I don't understand why the timeline would be shrunk at this point. Because we're doing a public hearing, right?
Well, okay, so we're also doing something correct in the law, which is we're having a public hearing on the
Programs, not in the budget.
which is this next month, okay? So we are following the law by doing the public hearing on the programs.
Right.
In Winnebago County, historically, what happened was they took the requirement of doing a public hearing on programs and they combined it with also doing a public hearing on the budget. And that's not a requirement in the law to do that. Because the time for public input on the budget is October. So so we were just doing something.
Right.
I don't know if it was convenient for the board or if you wanted to give the opportunity of the public to say something about human services.
Right, but we don't have to have a public hearing on the budget,
Okay.
the money part, just on programs.
Are they then asking the department to enter the information into the program, or is someone else doing that?
We do it, and in fact, we do it a whole different way than everybody else in the county. We have to go through this whole upload process that's different because we're so big.
But departments have always entered their own data.
So-
But I think this year, because they're doing this big upgrade to the county's financial system, which is happening, I think next week, the trainers are coming in. So it's just a weird set of circumstances this year.
So am I understanding then that a budget can't be presented to this board until it's updated or uploaded to the system? Is that how it works?
They wanted to make sure that the system could be that the system could be ready to go so that all the information could be there so that it could be printed out for you. And if it's the middle of July, they're not absolutely certain
It'll be ready.
that the system will be able to handle that. And they felt more comfortable with it being the end of July. Actually, if they had their druthers, like every other department, everybody would wait until October. I mean, everybody would basically get their summaries. Every department, other than ours, gets their budget summaries to their boards like in late September, early October.
The information we give you, you know, how we usually give you the printouts and we go through them. They want us to use the new software, whatever that spits out. They want us to use that of what we give to you. And they're not sure it's gonna be ready by the 18th.
Oh,
I suspect they may want to look at the whole county rolled up
Right.
to, make some decisions.
So it's super tight. And I mean, we could say we're gonna do what we can on the 18th and then, but we'd have some in paper and we'd have, it'd be a little bit. I don't think that's the preference of the county exec.
What we've given you in the past in that kind of large white binder, that's not from the county system. It's all our own separate spreadsheets. So we kind of jerry-rigged a system for us to use.
Well, now I'm totally making assumptions, but since this is a first time around with the new software, I'm assuming in my brain that you might be doing double duty and doing the old doing that the old way. So you know what, so you have a clear vision of where you're headed. And then trying it on the new software, seeing how that all works.
And I wish I could tell you one way or the other. I have not seen the new software. We've heard very little about it unless you've heard
Right,
something
and that's
recently.
the new software, not that I know a lot about it, but it divides up our programs in very different ways. And then the budget that's associated to it then rolls up in things that are related to those new subdivisions of our department. So the programs in the budget are gonna be together in a way that's gonna be more understandable to the county board. And so, but it's an entirely different way of presenting a budget to you than the way we do it now. And so I think the idea there was like, put these two together as close as possible in time so that we present the same information to you. And we're working off the same information at budget time. So that's why it's supposed to be like, and it's not ready yet. And so the question is it gonna be ready? And is even the end of July gonna be enough time? We could get there and go, it's not ready and we're not gonna be ready till the end of August. And then we're gonna be delayed again. So, I mean, that's possible too.
Right.
Yes, and then there's the huge learning curve that has to happen both in the department and then how you communicate the information.
There's
And then
two
everything
different
will go over.
softwares too. There's the priority-based budgeting software and there's the Munis
Yeah, and there's the
software,
unit software.
which are both going to be new to us this year. So
Oh, my word, sorry.
Becky,
That's a lot.
Becky, you are available the 27th?
I could make that
3 days.
Yeah, I mean, 27th is, if everybody else can make it on 27th.
Is that?
What day is
What day of the
that?
week of that is?
Thursday.
It's a Thursday, the 27th of July. Well, that's in the middle of EAA week, right?
Wait, why can't we meet during the EAA?
Well, Ralph's not
I
available.
won't be there.
Oh, Ralph's.
Ralph.
Ralph-
Kristen, no.
Ralph-
Jeff,
Okay.
Jeff,
People
But-
is it 27th,
I can do any day,
either date?
except for Tuesdays.
Karen?
Do Thursday, the 27th.
Okay, we have two no's. Yeah, then we lose Ralph. Harold? Larry? Either day?
Yeah, I can hear it 27th. I get back 25th.
And no matter what day we pick that week, that's all EAA week, and then we lose Ralph for the entire week. So Ralph's out for that week. So then we're kind of like back to, well, here's the other thing we could do. And I don't know if my boss would be happy with this, but I could just say, so throw this out to you as a suggestion, a possible suggestion is, we can say that there wasn't a good day where everybody could attend the public hearing, and we need to go back to the 18th and just deal with where we are on the 18th.
The 18th or the 17th?
Or whatever,
I had-
17th or whatever.
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Whatever
I
day.
kept saying the 18th.
You said
You're right.
18th.
Yeah, Monday.
It is the
So
17th.
we could
I'm
just
sorry.
say,
My fault.
basically, the only day that everybody's available is the 17th. So
17th. that
we'll
Monday.
we'll muddle through whatever we've got on the 17th.
Or is there a different day later that week? It's a little closer. I'm just talking.
Because everybody can make it on the 17th, right?
17th, that was on the budget, right?
On the,
That was the budget.
That was the
yeah.
budget, yeah.
That was the day on our calendar.
Monday
And
the
then
17th.
I
What do you want to do?
So it's basically, what I'm gonna give to Larry,
Oh,
Larry, you're the chair. It's at your pleasure to basically decide, do you want us to stick with the 17th? Do you want us to go with one of these other dates? What do you want to do? Because it's
Well,
ultimately,
looks like the 17th is the date that most people can already make it. I'm gone from the 20th to the 25th.
so what I would say,
As long
if
as it's
that's your
3
pleasure.
o'clock, any day that week I can make it. I have meetings in the morning, but I can
We
make,
get into EAA, then we lose Ralph.
no, the
That is
17th
the
Just talking about
morning
to
meeting.
the 21st.
The 17th would be a morning.
Would be a morning meeting.
Oh,
That's 8 o'clock meeting.
oh,
So it would be 9 o'clock.
okay, I can
Or 9
make Monday,
o'clock.
Tuesday,
That's here.
that's it. I can make
Yeah,
Monday,
here.
Tuesday.
Monday, Tuesday, okay. Well,
So if that's what you all decide, then I will just tell John that basically we couldn't find an alternative date where every member of the committee could be there.
I'll say what I can. do.
And so we stuck with the 17th.
we're back
I
to the
would, yeah, see
17th.
what he says.
Excuse me, can you tell me again what he wants to do on the 7th with us?
So, well, he just announced that to me a week ago, that he wants to present the budget
His budget.
in the format, well, yeah, it will be his budget,
It'll be
but
his budget.
theoretically incorporating your thoughts, whether he accepts them or he doesn't, but incorporating your thoughts. And then he wants to show it to you in the new format. So he wants to present the budget in the new way, the way in which we're kind of talking about, that it'll be in a different programmatic description way and a different budget way that attaches money to those programs.
And is that the day then that this board would approve that budget, or would
No,
we
I think
meet
that
on
you
the
would approve the
17th?
budget the way you'd like to see it on the 17th.
Okay.
And then that will go to John.
Right.
And then at that point, it becomes his budget and he can accept it, reject it, or modify it any way he wants to. So I think you guys have to have a position on the 17th that we let him know is your position. And then he incorporates it very quickly in 2 weeks into his budget. And then he will bring that back to you to show you, it's kind of like, look at it this way. I think he wants to present it to you're going to be the first committee
I was just gonna
that
say,
he would present it to.
this will be the first time that a county executives come to the board and say, this is what the budget is. We've never had county exec come to one of our board meetings
And explain the
and
new
explain
process.
the new-
And
explain his budget. That was always done with Bill and I and Ralph.
Right, it'd be individual department heads.
Right,
meeting with
Right, this will be the
these,
first time that actually a county executives coming to the whole committee and saying, this is my budget for the human services.
So all of the data has to be inputted by the end of July by departments? Okay, gotcha.
When does he want to come here and do that?
The 7th of August.
Oh,
our meeting
meeting
is
in August.
Yeah, the 7th. And so I said, okay, I mean, if you think you're gonna be ready, that's fine. I mean, you can come and present. I think it's a kind of a trial of how did it go? What were your questions? Did you think that this was more helpful than the old way? Any suggestions for improving it? Because he's gonna go to the other departments between then and the end of October. And then you guys get a chance to look at it again as a county board. at the end of
Right.
October.
Then it'll come.
Submit it
Yeah.
in the system.
All right, so we're gonna stick with
17th.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for the back and forth. I
That's okay.
landed with the 17th anyway.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about this priority-based budgeting and how it is similar or different to what you've customarily done?
It is completely different. I've read a book about it and I have looked at the software and gotten one training session of about an hour. As has Janet and the rest of us as managers. Right now, we're in the process of doing something called inventory. And inventory is basically taking all of our programs in our 5 divisions and basically breaking them down into smaller parts that basically emphasize service. So how we would describe our programs to you, like say, well, the program we just had, Adult Protective Services. Okay, you got a little bit of an explanation of Adult Protective Services today. And we try to describe that a little bit in the budget book, but in priority-based budgeting, there will probably be Adult Protective Services will be listed, but various functions within Adult Protective Services will also be listed. So investigating theft by, whatever, caregivers or family members.
So you guys are getting trained in this program when?
There's 3 separate training sessions. We had the first one, which was this program inventory. The
Okay,
next one is actually the budget component.
and that's when?
Next 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, we're gonna have
So,
how the budget connects to this.
so basically, it's
Inventory
kind of
gets,
answering Becky's question, then actually at our next meeting, June, you would have a better idea of what you're talking about, what?
As far as the budget.
Well, as far as the process.
But I want to know how it's different. I mean, usually budgets are centered around, a set of a mission, a set of values that are, that the different divisions use. They have their responsibilities and functions. Those, I'm speaking off the top of my head now, but now we've introduced this new idea. And maybe it's not new, priority-based budgeting, so I'm just interested in I'm
But
trying to
we just-
gauge how
would
it's
you do
similar
more?
and different to what's
The
been
next
done in the
meeting?
past, not the nitty-gritty software, but the concepts and the reasoning
Right.
behind it.
So the last part of it, inventory is the first part. The second part is budget attached to how much money does it take to fund that component of adult protective services? How much money does it take to produce this function of that part of adult protective services? So it's, the way we do it now is we just tell you, this is our total cost for personnel. This is our total cost for operations. We can break that down into various pieces of those things, but it's all just money on a sheet, right? And so this way it's trying to say, we're spending $1 million on this part of this program. And where it's going is to basically give you all, who are on a county board, like, this is what we're spending on these types of activities or functions. And do you like the fact that we're spending that amount of money on that function? And if somebody says, well, we'd like to see $100,000 less being spent on that function, that may be the direction that we get from the county board. Now, then we have to go back and figure out, like, okay, what are we supposed to do about, changing that function to be less costly? Or maybe we have to eliminate a function altogether. But it kind of breaks it down so that decision makers, the idea apparently is that decision makers then have more information about what it is that you think you want to change in a budget down the road. Gives you a little more detail than you have now about that. That's the idea. I don't know if good or bad, that's the idea.
Thank you. It sounds funny, and maybe that's just because it's called, it has to be called priority based. But it sounds like you become very subjective. Someone could say, well, Ann's department has a big priority, and that's not so much. Who makes that decision of what's the priority? And it sounds like with something called a priority based budget, someone has to tell you what his priority is. Right? It's very subjective.
Well, it is the county executive's budget to begin with until it becomes the county board's budget. So the county executive would look at that and then say, hey, I want to make some changes in maybe some of these areas, and then work specifically with a department in that particular area on how to change the amount of money in that function, up or down. And then you guys get a chance to look at that. So, I mean, it's kind of a totally different process really than looking at how we looked at numbers and basically making adjustments here and there. It's much more like, what is this part of this program costing? And do we want to do something different with that? So it gives decision makers more information about pieces of programs and how much money are going to those pieces and whether or not you'd like to see that changed. Now, is that good or bad? I mean, I could say from a professional standpoint, I don't know if decision makers have enough information to know whether that piece should go up or down. And I'm a little nervous about that, obviously, because I may say this component is absolutely necessary for the functioning of that particular area. And just because you want to spend half as much on it doesn't mean that, I think that that's, going to be the best interest of the county. And would you want my opinion about that? And maybe it's my job to explain it to you so that you understand it, so that you see the same thing that I'm seeing. So it puts more onus on us to try to describe more to you of what we're doing and why we're doing it. There's also going to be a rating system. So if it's something that is absolutely state mandated, it's going to have a higher rating, a higher rank than other parts of programs that don't have a mandate to them. So there's another possible way of deciding what stays and what goes. Is it mandated or not? Because whether you like it or not, it's mandated, you got to do it. So again, you're hearing this for the first time. We heard it just a few weeks ago for the first time. So we're all kind of like in our cumulative state of like, how is this going to work? I don't know. But apparently it's been used in cities around the country, other counties. There are a couple counties in Wisconsin that use it. And they seem to like it. So hopefully all of you as county board members And those of you who are citizen members will try to keep you up to speed on like what's happening.
We gotta be trained on it.
But hopefully,
Yeah.
you guys will know a little bit more about it too as we get to budget time. And I thought we were gonna take a year to study it, but it turns out that we're basically gonna put it all into, start in next year's budget. So we're all gonna be doing this between now and October together.
Honestly, we did that in either 2000, 2001, or 2002, because we had to identify the priority
Yeah.
programs in our department and had to put a rank on everything that we did as a department head and sit down with county board.
And how did it go? Do you remember how it
It
went?
was abandoned.
Yeah.
I think it was Sheboygan County that took the lead on it. They were doing it, so we thought we would try to, do you remember this, Harold?
Just a little bit.
I just remember having to come back from a meeting to present to the exec and the county board chair about how we ranked. Was 4-H more important than agriculture or more important? It was.
Well, we're definitely gonna get an inventory, we're gonna get budget attached to inventory, and we're gonna get a ranking. Those are the three things that I've been told that we're gonna get out of this first go round. And then how it relates to the budget is gonna be a decision for county board members.
Yeah.
So that, in a nutshell, that's what I know we're supposed to be driving.
It's a good thing to think about priorities,
Yeah.
but unless you really know that, for example, the work done by Children Protective Service, how it all fits together, and that it's not just either or. Good luck.
Yes, thank you.
So I guess please help us, those of you on the county
You
board,
betcha
we're
we
gonna
will.
need help too. You know, as we go along, but we're gonna do our best. And honestly, if we could describe it better, Becky, we would, but we're just like 2 weeks into it
I
ourselves.
mean, I just don't know how we can come up with, whether we don't understand what the process
Well,
is.
I guess I think about mandated services, things that we're absolutely required to do. And then I think about how we're not required to go the extra mile for kinship care.
Right.
Or the things that we do, but the things that are a philosophy that our organization has adopted because of research, decades and decades of research. And so that's where I see a rub, and a significant one, when we talk about providing a mandated service versus how our services impact the people we serve.
Or what the people mandate versus the government.
That's right.
mandates.
And we'll have to, in our rating system, we are going to, Renee and I and the managers are gonna have to make the case that even though it's not state mandated, that we're ranking it as high or sometimes even higher than a state mandate because it is that important. It's better for families and it costs less. So it's both, you know, it's both a better quality of service and it is cheaper in the long run to have that service. If you cut it, you actually increase costs and you decrease quality of service. And that case, I'm gonna have a hard time making that, making that clear because that's counterintuitive to most people. It's like, what do you mean? You have to, you're doing something that, is not mandated and somehow, that's a cheaper, better way of doing things. Like, didn't you just want to do it because you felt like it? No, I mean, the days of doing things because you just feel like doing them have been gone for probably about 3 decades. So, we have a challenge, Becky. We have a challenge to try to figure this thing out. And we're all just trying to learn this stuff as quickly as possible. Our first priority is by Friday, getting our inventory set. That's gonna be a big challenge because we're right in the middle of that right now. And then the next one is gonna be, how does the budget fit into that? How do we divide up then with all of those different components? How do we figure the budget differently? That the money going into those components, because we've never done that before. And then thirdly, we have to rate everything and get that in. And then we can start putting together, I think, the larger budget. So with that said, let's keep it at the 17th. We'll do our best to figure that out.
I'm just gonna say, that's gonna be interesting, because they gave me a book about this when I went to Washington. So I didn't, and now I know what the plan is now. That's what you do. But it was more like you're gonna get real into, I don't know if I want to say picky, but you're gonna, instead of giving $1 million to this group, you're gonna see the 17 or 18 things that they contribute to. And are we giving it to the right one, or should we put more money on something else? So it's gonna bring out a lot of stuff, the way it sounded, that maybe you're getting shortchanged in one of the departments that should be getting more, and another department is getting too much, not doing anything. So that's gonna come out in that, because you're not looking at that one picture of $1 million, you're looking at the, 50,000 here, 80,000 here, that you're gonna see them all. And then you rank them all. And then, there's gonna be some that are gonna be combined based on what I saw, that some will be combined, some that are maybe overlapping and become something else. So there's gonna be a lot of a shifting, because now it's getting more detailed. I don't wanna call it what they call it when they kind of microwave, look at everything, microwave. But it's kind of like that, but not, but it's gonna get detailed, but it's gonna make you supposedly to open your eyes and see what's going on, where the money is really going to, and is it going to the right place? Are your priorities right? You need to change. So, it's good, there's good on one side on that, because you get to look at everything rather, because a lot of times on budgets, I know even Carbets, someone said they wanted a certain amount for this, but we never really asked them what, because that's what they always got for that, and every year is take a little bit less than that. Then they decided, well, let's get a little more detail. Let's see where that money is going. Then we found out we had 4 or 5 things that we never really spent the money on, but just sat there. So you kind of opened your eyes. So that part is good. It's going to be bad, because you get, because now instead of the budget being this, it's going to be looking at a whole bunch of stuff. So it opens up more eyes and stuff. But it sounded like more, it's going to make more aware what's going on. So if you look at it positive and not negative, that was great.
More awareness for the county board members as to where large bunks of money are going to, and how, and what the outcome is supposed to be for that, and what the rating is for that. And if you're right too, he's looking for, if there are 2 departments that do something similar, then maybe that could be identified in this process where they could share that resource. So I'll just use an example. Highway and Parks may have a similar dump truck. And maybe in the process of figuring this thing out, maybe it's a shared service between Highway and Parks for a dump truck kind of thing. So there may be some sharing of services that wasn't thought about before, that maybe now gets identified through this process. So that's a potential benefit of doing it.
It will be different.
The last thing I had for those of you full board members is you'll see me tomorrow night at the special orders meeting. Bill and I have been asked to come back to present about day by day. You mentioned it, Ralph, and just another summary of how we got called in and running the emergency warming shelter, and then our final cost, or at least the costs we have so far. So I'll be there tomorrow night.
Are we unwinding from that? Are we unwound already?
We are done as of
We are done.
yesterday.
As of yesterday.
Yesterday was the last day of our contract.
Yeah, we don't have all the final costs because we were still supporting them in other ways through April 30th. So we don't, I'll have to make sure I preface that. Not all the bills have come in. We're still waiting, but we'll give them what we have. We'll give you all what we have to date anyway. So that's all.
I just have one question if I can. Just how the pay thing went. We talked about last time, and I think that was the time you were giving out letters, I think, to everybody about that time, was that too, right? So I just wondered how it went. I mean, you don't have to go long, but how did it go? Or
So we ended up having, Janet might know better for me, what was our percentage of folks that did not get a bump? It was small. It was small considering we have 330 some people here. We had 13%. About 13% that did not receive anything, given a county our size, that's, or an agency our size, that's pretty good. However, you can imagine for those folks,
13%. That was a tough.
Still tough. For some folks, the managers having to have those conversations with them, doing the best they could to explain the why. Some folks were like, okay, I understand, maybe not thank you, great, but I understand. Other folks still not gonna be happy.
I know wasn't there some couple of changes, like some of the gradings was reversed, so they had to go back to the right way.
Yeah, there were a lot of reviews.
So there's a lot of things that were had to change.
There were a lot of reviews and a lot of things that changed because of the reviews. I mean, I think they really, John, Ethan, Mark, Havik, HR, Mike Collard. They took every request to be reviewed seriously and they re-reviewed them and sometimes reviewed them 3 and 4 times. And a lot of them that were reviewed, if they changed in the worker's favor, not in the reverse. So, did it make everybody happy? No. Was it a plan that was supposed to lift everybody up? No, that wasn't how it was designed. It was designed to try to get people where they're supposed to be based on their number of years in position. So, yeah.
So I figured that means like 45 people didn't get a bump. That's about 13%. Of those people who didn't get a bump, how soon are they eligible for something to increase for them? I mean, and did the other increases go into effect immediately?
Yeah, the people who got increases, it was reflected in the last paycheck in March.
Okay, so those 45 who didn't get something, when's their next shot? What's the next possibility for them?
January.
In January?
Yeah.
And based on their, as of right now, our performance evaluations happen in the fall. As of today, we still have a pay for performance system. There's lots of discussion about whether or not that should change and what it would change to, and whether or not a cost of living, you heard this at board meetings, if that should just be an automatic thing. To my knowledge, none of that's been
So
decided.
these 45 people did not have high performance reviews.
No.
This had nothing to do with performance.
Nothing to do with that.
But their next eligibility, to answer your question, won't be until the next, like the rest of us.
Right.
But this was reslotting based on years in position.
But-
So their shot at that part is done. Yes?
But in
I'm saying that
reviewing it,
correctly?
I would rather see those 45 people be redlined and not get anything. There are companies that evaluate those and they decrease their pay. See, I didn't want that. There are companies that do take money away.
Nobody lost.
No, that's what I'm saying. I would rather have them redline and get nothing than lose money.
I think the most, you've heard some of this before, and managers, please jump in, or Bill, the folks that are having the most angst around the 45 are folks that have transferred positions. But if it was a lateral move, or even if it was a promotion, you heard me say when this was first rolling out, so yes, you were promoted. Let's take that one. You were
got the money,
promoted, you got a bump for being promoted. But if your time in the position, say I was in my previous position, which I wasn't, so this isn't me, but let's say I was in my previous position for 15 years. So none of that time is counted. And so some of our folks are like, okay, so what about that? Folks who took a lateral position. So let's say I was a case manager in behavioral health, let's say I stay in behavioral health. This is a person, this is a real person. I was on the intensive services team for many years, and then I move over to crisis, lateral move, same pay grade. I've only been in crisis for a year. So my time in that position, 1 year. So that's where the angst for our folks who are having angst is coming from. Is that fair to say? Yes.
And some positions, where they did give some slack was if the positions are relatively the same type of position, but kind of just changed in name only, they would give credit for maybe those 2. But if the position that they moved to, even if lateral, was different, significantly different from the position that they left, then they would only get credit for the position that they're currently in. And so that everybody was feeling like, well, I got 20 years let's say I got 20 years in the county, I should get credit for all 20 years. And it's like, but this was a design to give you credit for time and position. And that was stated from like the beginning, that was how they were using the dividing line was time and position.
But I think we all sort of said we didn't think that was really the most fair thing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
That's what we were, that's what we were,
It wasn't.
that's what we were
It
headed.
wasn't, but for the 16 years that I negotiated state contracts or whatever, on your class and comp surveys, I've always asked people, be careful what you ask for, because you can get sometimes what you ask for.
They had to pick a process, and that's the process they picked. And actually, for the vast majority of employees, it did mean
It
something.
did help, yeah.
And the other thing to recognize is that now they made a commitment, the administration has made a commitment that now you will be able to move across that pay range on a regular basis, so that now you won't be stuck somewhere in the middle and never get higher than the midpoint, which is what was happening in the past. There wasn't enough money going in to the pay increases every year to keep people moving. And so John's basically said he's going to make a commitment to moving people along that continuum. So the people who didn't receive a raise right now,
They're eventually gonna, but it won't be right
the
away.
idea is that they're going to move along that continuum the way they should have been moving in past years. So they should be able to get to the end of their range in the course of their career,
All right.
as opposed to being stuck somewhere in the middle and never seeming to get beyond.
Okay.
That's good that 87% since 2006 didn't get anything. So I mean, that was good that way. And just one question on the 45 you said, is there a chance that some of those people were just hired, so they aren't going to get a raise, they just got their pay, whatever, right? So that could be a good share of
Yeah,
those
some of
people
them
too.
are.
Folks are
like
You just already got hired, you're not eligible for a raise until January, so you could have.
They actually did get a raise, didn't they? Because they got moved up.
They moved the pay grade up so that
Yeah, well, the minimum that works, so,
Yeah, the minimums move, but if you were like, say, a couple years into it,
which are fairly.
you would potentially not get an increase because you probably are already paid correctly.
It's great to have it since 2006 and then 2016 do another, to do something for 87, whatever. It's a huge period. And they're not done yet. They're still looking at their benefits.
And benefits too.
And they're still talking about this, what you talked about, people in a long time. Because I saw that and I know that.
So you guys are gonna get that on the county board. There's gonna be more ideas coming through. And Jeff's shaking his head. He doesn't want to hear about it anymore.
Anything else?
No, that was quiet.
Bill?
All right,
Yeah.
so I'm going on a different direction. First of all, I want to thank everybody who came to Human Services Day at the Capitol. Thank you guys for being part of it. Sorry Ralph couldn't be there that day. He had a thing that came up right at the last minute. But thank you guys for coming.
It was a good time.
The message I'm getting, that we had over 160 people, the largest group of county representatives ever at Human Services Day at the Capitol. So we really came out. The legislators, I think we saw a fair number of the actual legislators that day.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, we end up seeing just the
Just their staff,
assistants.
yeah.
So I was happy to see that we actually saw the legislators that day. And I really felt like they were listening.
Well, it is
All
because
of them.
they asked,
That's a big surprise. Huh?
well, it is because, and the thing is, they asked questions, which you knew if they asked questions, they were listening. You know, just, yeah, well, no, normally they don't.
Right.
Normally, it's kind of like, yeah, they'll write it all down. They won't say a word through the whole thing. These guys asked questions or whatever, so you knew that they were listening.
And Chelsea Shanks, who's our lobbyist for Wisconsin County Human Services Association, has had follow-up meetings with about 20 different legislators, some of which are ours,
Yeah.
Representative Shaw and Senator Fine. And a lot of them are going to be authoring pieces of legislation to kind of further our requests. So
Yeah.
we had a request for 100% of mental health crisis funding. We get about 60% right now. 100% of community support program, which is a behavioral health program for the chronically mentally ill. We asked for the governor's budget, put in a request for 100%. We're asking for 100%. Those two things are, I think, are getting a pretty fairly warm welcome.
I think
I
so.
don't think the legislator took out those pieces
Yeah.
in his budget yet, so that's good. You saw that the legislature took out like 500 different things in the governor's budget so far, but those two are not taken out, so that's good. There was extra funding for adult protective services. And I know that Chelsea has talked to at least one member of the legislature about authoring something on that in that respect, so that's fantastic. Didn't hear anything yet about Birth to Three. That was another of our programs in long-term support. And then child support, I haven't heard anything about the additional funding for child support. That of course is not our department, that's other department of the county. And then the last one we kind of snuck in was the children's long-term support maintenance of effort. And for Winnebago County, that's about 800,000 a year in our tax levy that we basically were unfairly tagged with. And back when they started the children's long-term support waiver, the counties that actually put in levy in 2016 to try to reduce the wait list got held to having to put that amount of money in forever, every year forever. And so Winnebago, I think, is the third highest maintenance of effort in the state at $800,000 a year. And so we asked Representative Shaw and Fine, our last meeting and they said maybe they take it up. They have followed through with that. They are talking with Chelsea, and they're planning on a standalone piece of legislation to take us out of it and to basically replace that 6 million statewide with other GPR funding, other general purpose revenue. So if that works, we would benefit by 800,000 more being available in levy that we don't need. So, I mean, if we get any one of those things, we are going to be that much further ahead. We are going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars ahead. So I'm just crossing my fingers for any of that to work. But again, a big thank you for you guys that went, because even if you didn't say anything, just your presence makes a statement. Because we had their attention.
Yeah,
Yeah, appreciate that. The second thing I was going to bring up, and now I should have written it down because that's what happens to me. I forget it.
Silvercrest.
It's Silvercrest. Thank you. Silvercrest. Thank you, Becky. Okay, so next month, you will be getting a resolution and an agenda item report on Silvercrest, the sale of Silvercrest. So just to bring you up to speed in a hurry, basically the Winnebago County Housing Authority owns Silvercrest. It is a 8-bed group home, not a shelter care, because there's a little distinction between shelter care and group home. It's an 8-bed group home for boys that we rent from the Housing Authority, and we have family services that runs it for us. And a group home is similar to shelter care, except the stays of the kids are typically 6 months to 2 years, rather than a few days to a month, which is shelter care. You can only have kids there for a month. But in group homes, you can have there 6 months to 2 years. And we have had 4 to 8 boys there pretty consistently for all the years that I've been here. And so the Housing Authority just a month and a half ago or so basically said, we want to sell Silvercrest the building, which of course then sends us into panic mode, because who's going to buy the building? Are they going to use it for something else? Are we going to lose this facility? And the answer was, we probably need to buy it. So what happened in a hurry was Annette and Mike Elder both went out to Silvercrest. It's up in Neenah, and it's 10,000, 11,000 square feet. 11,000 square feet. And it's going to apparently be on the tour. For those of you who are going on the building tour on May 15th, we're going to add Silvercrest to the tour spots. And Mike Elder went up there and said that he didn't think it needed that much rehab, not as much as shelter care. He thought only about 100,000. And also the asking price from the Housing Authority was 240,000, which again is a lot less expensive than the shelter care. So so basically the whole works would be probably around 350,000. So we're going to put together resolution, agenda item report. You'll get that next month, and we're going to start the route from here to facilities committee to PNF. We got to do a presentation at the county board, and then the county board ultimately acts on the sale. So that's where we're going. And we have enough time. We have till the end of the year. So we'll be able to get it in pretty quickly. And it'll be somewhat familiar to county board members because it's kind of like the shelter care, sort of, but it's a little bit different. And I just need to explain the difference so people understand what that's about. And then our plan is that either Family Services or another agency will run it for us. We're not planning on adding the staff ourselves to man it. And part of the reason is that we think that we can still use Family Services or another agency to run it for us because they've been doing fairly well at managing it. And the reason that we ended up taking over shelter care is because LSS was getting out of the business and there were no other vendors available to run the shelter care. But there are agencies that run group homes and that we have choices there to do that. So that's the idea of that. So just want to give you a background on it's coming. It'll be in your, you'll be able to ask all kinds of questions next month. We'll have the agenda item report. We'll have the details for you. And there will be a tour on May 15th. So you get a chance to look at the building. Sometime in July, August will be county board presentation. And then the next month, you'll act on it. So that's what's happening there. And I think that was really all that I wanted to update you on this month, unless there's questions.
I do have one. Do we own shelter care now or not yet?
You own shelter care.
Okay. And if
You passed buying it. I remember the closing date, I think was in January.
Okay.
And I heard everything went well with the closing. So we own the building and we have our own county staff as of January 1st. We had project position staff and then we ended up having our own staff at January 1st. So we've been operating it and running it since January 1st. We've had our struggles because it's been challenging for us to keep everybody in place the way we need to. But I think we're having less challenges now than LSS was having in the past. And we've also, you guys have passed some improvements in pay to a couple extra dollar differential. That was a few months ago. You passed that. Unfortunately, the staff haven't gotten paid that yet because we had some problems with them logging their time. We have a payroll issue with how to track that. And hopefully we get that resolved pretty quick so people can get their differential pay. So that's what's going on with that.
Okay. One more question. I'll try not to ask so many. ARPA. Now, we always hear about ARPA.
Yeah.
In the last board meeting, they took 25% away from the nonprofit and they gave it back to this government program. And I asked the Human Services, they had no plans of applying for any of that ARPA. Do Human Services have any plans to try to apply for any of that money? Because it's government.
Not directly for our operations.
Okay.
But right now I am in talks about housing projects in the community that might be available for people who are recovering from mental illness, substance use, veterans, that we would like to see some priority be given to harder to place people in low to moderate rental situations. And there's potentially going to be an ask of the county to loan a company some money so that they can put up the housing project, and that we would be given first right of choice for empty apartments for some of them, for some of those apartments, for people that we need to help get in for rent. So there is a project. I don't really want to tell you about it all because I don't know yet if it's going to end up there, and that's obviously the commission needs to hear about it and decide what they want to do.
I just want to make sure that if we have some needs, we should.
We're working on
get right
housing
in there and do
kind of
something
related stuff like that. But for our operations, we wouldn't be asking for additional
short.
You have a question, Bill?
Pam's just reminding me to remind all of you, I think she forwarded you the email about drug court graduation
Oh, yeah, okay.
on the 4th. Thank you.
Thursday.
Thursday the
Thursday at 10.
4th. I know Ralph has been there in the past.
It's worth it.
If not this time, maybe another time, but if you ever get a chance to see it, it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
It's worth it though.
Where's the
You cry.
Yeah,
you learn about people,
Thursday,
you learn a lot,
10 o'clock.
And it does last a little bit because everyone goes through talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
their family.
Did you say it made you cry?
Oh, yeah, because you got, the people, you have sponsors that come in and talk about it.
Right.
Just type up, they say something about how good they are, how they change their lives. And the thing that, I think I told this before, but the pattern that I saw was, unfortunately, grandma, mom had the situation. Now the daughter has it, and the daughter's in this room, and they have 3 kids back here. They're worried about those 3 kids because there's a good chance of going there. But it was good because a lot of the kids got into it. Everybody talked about it. The whole courtroom was packed with people. I mean, it was 3 hours, and they talked about the stories and how they recouped and how it was well worth it to see what they're doing, because it was well worth this program. It was
It's not
100
normally that long, in case
No.
any of you are thinking, oh my gosh, 3 hours.
But it
Not
wasn't
normally
that
that
time.
long.
It was the longest class at 5. And I think it was 189. They had graduates at that time. I think it was.
There's 4 graduating this year.
So, I mean, but it was well worth it, learn. I mean, it was an experience that you'll.
Another thing that we have this week, Wednesday, the drop-in center, the State Street Center is having its craft sale. So different individuals that participate in programming there are able to sell some of their talents. So there's a craft sale Wednesday from 11 until 2. So if anybody wants to stop in, support some of our.
Harold,
Mr. Chairman, I have no report.
Peggy,
No report.
Chris,
I'm sorry to say that the Powerful Tools for Caregivers class that I mentioned earlier is not happening. We didn't have enough enrollees to run the program. You want to start with at least 8 so that you have a carry through. But what I heard both Beth and Nicole talk about this earlier is the importance of building those relationships first. So we're confident we'll have more classes because of the work they're doing. So thanks.
Also, the Fox Valley Memory Project got a nice grant from the Community Foundation to do advertising in regards to that kind of stuff, coming soon to come out this summer. We're hoping will help with that.
We still encounter people that say, I don't want to get involved with a county. There's fear.
But we're scary.
Right, and
And sometimes we are scary,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately.
And the other issue that I've heard people talk about is the time, that if they are involved with caregiving, they don't have time. And it's unfortunate, that's often the key to the success. We'll try again, we're trying again.
yeah. Bro,
I just kudos to you and your team again. I can't say it enough that what they've done accomplished is unbelievable, and keep it going. And we are out there thinking about them. Don't forget that.
Karen,
Nothing for me.
I get nothing. Some of us will be going to the Human Services, Elkhart Lake Human Services conference in Elkhart Lake Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so. Always a good one. I wish more people would go because the workshops are really good, so.
They'll be next year. There'll
They'll be
be
next year, yeah.
another 2-dayer in December.
All right. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, adjourn. Thank you.
Anybody ever say nay? They don't want to. I mean, I was looking at
Stay.
it. Let's just stay.
You're gonna stay here by yourself?
I'd have to stay here.